Welcome to the Rooted Intentionally podcast. I'm Susan Carson, an author, speaker, and spiritual coach. Through conversations and practices, we open safe space for encounters that restore our souls. Together, let's dive into the depth of God's love. Welcome to Rooted Intentionally. I'm Susan Carson, and I am beyond excited to be here today again with my friend Felicia Murrell. Felicia, welcome.
Susan, thank you so much for having me. I am elated to be with you today.
Thank you. It's so much joy for me to get to talk to you again and let people know you have a brand new baby book coming out into the world.
I do. I'm so excited about it. I have my copy too. We have matching copies. Really excited about it.
Well, I'm very excited about it. I was honored to endorse it, and I look at your list of endorsers and their names, and I'm like, what am I doing at this list of people?
Well, I can think of anyone more that I really am grateful for endorsing the book and the work, and it meant so much to me to have your endorsement there.
Oh gosh, thank you so much. And we're going to talk about this brand new book today, but for people who haven't met you yet, because you've been on the podcast before, but if people haven't listened, if people haven't encountered your work in your life yet, you are a certified master life coach. You are a pastor for years in the church, and now you serve the publishing industry as a freelance copy editor. But more than anything, to me, you're a voice and a presence that really you bring so honestly and vulnerably in this new book. If people don't follow your socials, they should, because you continuously inspire me, you provoke me in the best ways to think outside my little privileged bubble of a life that I can live within that bubble so easily, right? And you call me outside that bubble. So your voice and the work you do now in justice and advocacy and love, to me, you're one of the human representations of love on this planet right now. And you bring that so beautifully to us in this book as you're honest, you're vulnerable, you're confrontive, you're provocative, you're restorative. It's prayerful, it's poetry, it's prose, it's practices. I don't know of another book like this, Felicia. It's really beautiful.
Thank you so much for that. I'm laughing because I remember meeting my acquisitions editor at Whitaker House for the first time. And she said something very similar. And she was like, it's just all the things, and I'm not even sure what category we can set it in. But it's, I love it. And I was telling her that a friend of mine said, this reads like jazz. You know how jazz kind of, and it goes, and then it has improv, and then synchronization, and then it follows a thread, and then it comes back to another one. And when I said that, her face just lit up, and she was like, oh, I love jazz music. And yes, this is a book that reads like jazz. So
yes. Oh, I love that. I think that's true. And it's a book to be read slowly, I think. It's a great bedside table book, I think, or to sit next to you on your desk, to just pick it up and savor a bite and let it, I want to say digest it, to metabolize it, right?
Yeah, that's actually really what I had in mind. So thank you for highlighting that. My favorite books, I'm an avid reader, but my favorite books are the ones that I keep a set by the sofa on my coffee table, and I keep a set by my nightstand. And they are books of poetry or meditations, but just things that I can pick up and read, bite-sized chunks. And as you say, just savor them and sit with them. And I love to do that in the morning when I wake up after I've had my quiet time, and at night before I go to bed. So those words are kind of there lingering. And in my mind, this is what I envisioned was, um, to create something that someone could just pick up and enter and sit with, or maybe it stirs something and they feel like, oh, I need to move that energy and go for a walk with that, and just muse on it a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah. I love those kind of books too. So I wanted to start. I have some readings I actually want to share from the book.
Awesome.
But you have a foreword by somebody that people might recognize his name, Father Richard Rohr, an afterword, I should say, to the book. And I wanted to read it, if that's okay.
Oh, that's great.
It's titled "And," just like your book. And teaches us to say yes and allows us to be both and keeps us from either or, and teaches us to be patient and long suffering, and is willing to wait for insight and integration, and keeps us from dualistic thinking, and does not divide the field of the moment, and helps us to live in the always imperfect now, and keeps us inclusive and compassionate toward everything, and demands that our contemplation become action, and insists that our action is also contemplative, and heals our racism, our sexism, heterosexism, and our classism, and keeps us from the false choice of liberal or conservative, and allows us to critique both sides of things, and allows us to enjoy both sides of things, and is far beyond any one political party, and helps us face and accept our own dark side, and allows us to ask for forgiveness and to apologize, and is the mystery of paradox in all things, and is the way of mercy, and makes daily practical love possible, and does not trust love if it is not also justice, and does not trust justice if it is not also love, and is far beyond my religion versus your religion, and allows us to be both distinct and yet united, and is the very mystery of Trinity.
May it be so.
May it be so. So this word "and," it's full, right? The title is "And the Restorative Power of Love in an Either or World." So I wonder why this word, this book, this way at this time.
Yes. That's such a great question. I think for me, I would honestly have to say, and has saved my life, and has been salvation, and has saved friendships and relationships and enlarged my capacity to hold. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and I have this thing that's been stirring around in me of late, where I say to my heart, I includes, and but I can't include without you know,
Mm.
and so I don't know. I think I have always been a very black and white kind of person, just like it's either this or it's this, and just very like cut and dry about it. And then maybe 2 decades ago, um, the divine really started inviting me into a riotous display of color, the spectrum of life that includes even grayscale and a blend of both the black and white. And
Mm.
I used to say things like, oh, I don't do messy, right? As if life and humans could ever be so clean cut and ordered in that way.
Mhm.
And through Spirit started inviting me to hold tenderness and compassion and grace and a non-judgmental lens, first toward myself, um, my own body, my own being, the way I ordered myself in the world. And then from that, and really through that compassion, I was able to begin to see it and let it grow and let it expand into the circle of life.
Mm.
But it has been that link, that bridge. Um, it feels like for me in this time, in this place, in this season, particularly in America, as we come up on another election year,
Mm.
that and is the bridge of our return and the way not back to something um, before, but the turning of ourselves to one another, turning toward one another. Yeah, that's what Anne feels like in this time now. So
Mm. So needed. If I've we've always needed it, right? In our humanity, we do tend to be this way, dualistic, either or thinking, all or nothing thinking. But yeah, you mentioned the elections coming and the things going on in our world right now, Christian nationalism and all the fragmenting,
yeah,
right, of our churches and our culture, really, even our families are
yeah,
divided over these things. So I'd love, if you can, I'd love to hear more about that journey because you talk really honestly about your childhood and what it was like growing up in the South
yeah,
and how you began to see, I think it was your grandmother was really intent on helping you see that that was not all that the world was. But yet it sounds like even as adult, there have been significant experiences that have helped sort of mess up the black and whiteness of all of
yeah,
it. So I just love to hear a bit more if you'd share with us of your own story.
yeah. I and I think and is an invitation, and
Mm.
I think one of the ways that we come into it for those who don't have the privilege of being able to afford travel and going to different places in that we can come into it through books, through reading, reading other authors outside of our dominant culture,
Mhm.
um, reading other countries books written by authors in other countries. That is a way that we broaden.
Mm.
And what my grandmother did for us, and I'm just really grateful. And in her mind, maybe she was just trying to come up with a list of activities to keep her grandchildren busy during the summer. But um, the Smithsonian, in DC, it became the world, and it was a way to experience the world and see something bigger than the South that I was raised in, and to know that there was an invitation of the world there. And I think, and I'm very fortunate in that I joke, but I know that it's a kiss from the divine, and that really the weaving of my life has been filled with so many different experiences. We've experienced in our adult life different denominations of church. And because I've been in not just one type of church all of my life, it gives me a broader understanding of why people may think a certain way, or how they hold certain things, or what's dear to them, what they're holding. And I like to, for myself, in the holding of that, the understanding of that, I have this visual image of fear a lot of times causes us to hold things very tightly, like with clenched fists. And we don't want to let them go. We want to protect them and shield them and make sure they're always there. And we're deeply attached to them, whether that's people or ideas or beliefs or any of that. We're deeply attached to it. And then sometimes when we've been hurt or wounded or whatever, apathy will cause us to hold things way too loosely, in the sense that they just fall off without any care at all. And we take on I don't give a care about this kind of thing, when really we do. We're just trying to protect ourselves. And so, and for me, has been the invitation to hold it not tightly, not loosely, but cut, as if I'm holding this with tenderness, and I'm holding this with care. All these things that matter to me, all the people that matter to me. But I'm also holding them in a way that if it's time in the journey for them to fall off or go away or move, they can without me resisting it, right? And so it's just this cup. And you think about like this, if you're doing this with water, cupping your hands, the water is there in a way that is enough for you to drink from and to receive, but it also can flow freely from you as well. And so that takes me back to and I think when you have experiences, Doug and I used to say all the time about our kids, we need to send them on missions trips. But the reason why was because we felt like if the only thing they know is, like you mentioned, that privileged bubble that they live in, and they don't get to see how other people experience their lives and their lived experience and that, then then our eye does not include, right? We can become very selfish, very polarized, very fragmented. But I always think of, the gospel, and I may be overlaying or whatever, but just during the feeding and at the end, Jesus said, make sure no fragments remain. So even the invitation of the fragments being gathered, that we're not, the invitation is not to be fragmented and cut off. It's to gather it all. And gathers it all. And this, and this, and this, and this. And so I think the travels, I think my love of art and culture and museums and books and food and experiences in different religious settings and interfaith, particularly beyond just Christian faith tradition, has allowed my and to blossom and hold and expand. But again, I realize that even that for me is a privileged position, that I can afford to have access to those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think, as I listen to you, what you've given us, one of the things you've given us in this book is the opportunity to do that, right? Because you share your story, your heart. So honestly, you bring a voice into my life that we don't live near each other. I wish I could have coffee with you. I can't, right? But I can know you and your story and your experience through your book in a way that changes me. And that's beautiful.
That really is my hope. That take, eat,
Mhm.
I think often of the process of communing, the process of breaking bread, and how it deepens knowing. And like you said, it's beautiful when we can do it face to face in real time, over coffee, over wine, over food. And I'm also grateful for the other mediums that are in the world that allows us, when we open ourselves to receive, to humbly listen, to take in. So that means a lot to me. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Um, we've already touched on my first couple questions, but I wanna read something.
Okay.
Um, this is this book, as I mentioned, is a beautiful mix of poetry and prose, and then you get really practical sometimes in really helpful ways. Um, but this is one of your poems. The thing is, we've got to feel the pain to heal it, and then we've got to heal. Pain demands we pick a side, but we don't have to. We can choose to side with love, and love sees fully. Love is inclusive of both the victim and the perpetrator. In our black and white, right or wrong, polarized society, we demand allegiances and then we castigate or accept others based on their loyalty to their ideals instead of loving them for their humanity. We all have the potential within us to do depraved things. Wretched man that I am. It doesn't mean our depraved actions define us. It means we need love to deliver us from evil. And sometimes that evil lurks within. When love transforms our heart, our actions align with the truth of our being. And we remember that which we already are. The very good of God's creation, created in the image and likeness of love. Holy moly.
That's one of my favorite pieces in the book, actually. Thank you for reading it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's one of my favorite ones too.
I have in my book that I plan to travel with. I'm doing a few book events, but all the green ones are poems that of my sticky tabs. All the green ones are poems that I would like read if I'm asked to do a reading, and that one is definitely one that is tapped in my book. So
Yeah, it cuts right to the heart of it, right? Like we have to feel
yes,
the pain that our fragmentation and our othering of others creates, right? In the very fabric of our humanity. We have to feel
yeah.
that.
And that's one of the things I think that we are most scared of sometimes is to feel it because I think often, honestly, that if we touch the depth of that pain, we think we might lose ourselves.
Yeah.
But love sustains us in all things, even in the honest part of feeling. And
Mm.
it is in the feeling that we allow lament to happen, that we allow grief to happen. And
Mm.
I think because as humans, because we are such meaning making people, right?
Mm.
That even in the feeling, we want to reason, we want to have a reason why this is this way. And then how can I fix it? I want to rush to not feeling, but fixing, because that allows me to create some distance between it being personal.
Mm.
But for healing to happen, we have to let it hit the air, and we have to sit with it long enough to touch it, you know. And I think about our world from COVID and the rush to get back to normal, and how, but a lot of people carried with them into whatever was normal that energy that had not yet been set with and allowed to really hit the air and given the place to say, this was painful, this was scary, and it was unknown. And we have not been in a society that has allowed us to learn how to walk in mystery in a way that we could hold being sheltered in place for 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we so crave our comfort, right? Our familiar comfort.
Yes.
I know I do anyway.
Yeah.
You strike on something else, well, several things in this poem, which is the beauty of poetry, right? You could say so much
Yes.
in a relatively short space of time. But this idea of the truth of our being and the way of our being coming into alignment and knowing our goodness and
Yeah.
our belovedness, right? And living in that love. How has that, is that something you've always known for yourself, or have
Oh
you?
gosh, no, not at all. And I am deeply indebted to Paul Young and him writing The Shack, and just the message of love that he carries. I think of Brian Stevenson, who's doing really a similar work in a different way. Brian Stevenson is the executive director of EJI, Equal Justice Initiative, out of Montgomery, Alabama. And he works with wrongly incarcerated men and women on death row and trying to get them free. He's a Harvard trained lawyer. He wrote a book some years ago called Just Mercy. And but one of the things that Brian often says is, we are more than the worst thing we've ever done. And so he goes right to the heart of identity. And often shame would have us think that our actions are who we are. Um, and and I think one of the things that love does is allow us to be honest about the places inside of us where we've done harm or we've done wrong, whether that's to ourselves or to someone else or to the community. And then to understand that just because I've done something doesn't mean I am something. That's not who I am, it's just what I did. And when I can release myself and let myself off the hook and own accountability, definitely, but also, the letting go of saying, because I did this, I am a bad person. And beginning to believe what love believes about me. That is in our quiet, if that's a question that we could ask, love, what do you believe about me? How do you see me? And just in the quiet, allow love to whisper that kindness to us, to show us what that looks like for us. When we do dumb things, and we all do crazy things, and we all make mistakes or do wrong things from time to time. But if we have that love letter, the wooing, the knowing of how love sees us and who love says we are, we can always come home to ourselves through the truth of love's words to us, and that's unique and distinct for each one of us. But it is the song of our I amness. It is the song of our enoughness. It is the song of our being, our goodness. the beauty and truth of who we are. And I think so much of where we are is the clamor of life has drowned out that song, right? But when I turn my face toward love and I allow the song to be sung, I know that that song exists not just for me, but every single human being. You know, so how do I wrong my brother knowing that song is there? That song makes up the symphony of life for all of us. It's the orchestra of the circle of life, you know? Yeah. And so no, Susan, I didn't start there. Trust me. I was I was full of rage and I was full of violence. And so I know that I have been both the monster and the slayer. And I have also been saved by love. And I, you know, when people ask me about titles and roles and function, the thing that matters most to me is that I am a woman transformed by love. I can look at my life, I can look at my relationship with my kids, with my husband, with myself, with my parents who are now deceased, but I can see a marked difference on a timeline that says I was this kind of way up until this point. And then when I open my heart to not just know about love from a academic standpoint or that, but to experience love loving me, to really, you know, love, even right now, love is loving us. If we pause and we drop into ourselves, we put our feet on the ground and we take a deep breath, you know, love is loving us right now. And when we turn our faces towards that with intentionality over sustained time, that love begins to transform us. Because what happens in that dance is, I call it love's refining fire. All of those things that are within us, you know, where we're acting outside of the truth of who we are, they start rising to the surface. And little by little by little, love touches those things, brings things to our remembrance, ask us to hand things off, you know, and begins to share truth where there was lies. And where things we would respond one way, all of a sudden now we're responding with the kindness and the compassion that we didn't before. But I think in our society, because we tend to be so linear, we look for that transformation to happen through some type of formula. So we want a prayer list, or we want a checklist, or a self-help book or something. And those may all be doors and invitations. I'm not knocking any of that, you know, because love is big. But there's something in when we understand the personhood of love and the communing of love and that invitation, that our hearts begin to change. Yeah. So I think again, and I think it's a real collective, global, civic, legislative kind of thing that has to happen in our world, but priority is on the heart transformation that needs to happen in each of us.
Yeah, I so agree. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is that experience of love, of being loved. It's in the inner healing work that I get to do with some other folks here in Cincinnati. It's the kind of thing that you do in your life. And it's what's changed me, right? The encountering.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think the bigness of love has shown me, like, you know, it's the thing that I always say is the thing that makes our walls come down. Where do we get most vulnerable so that love can come in? Because when we're armored up to protect ourselves, And I saw this even with myself, with everything going on in the world, with our politics and with, the racial climate and women's rights and all these things. It's enough to make you angry. But I remembered who I was as an angry person. And I didn't want to be that woman anymore. I don't want to live armored up in the world. I want to live open, but I also want to live honest. And so I always want to be honest about what I'm saying. And I want to live open enough to understand that we're all on a journey home to love. We're all at different places in that journey. And even that is an invitation. Mm-hmm. And when you have an invitation, you get to choose if you say yes to that, right? Mm-hmm. And there are some people who have not yet chosen to say yes. Yeah. And so that means that I have to understand how to hold them with compassion and understand how to relate and have boundaries at the same time, Mm-hmm. But doing so means that I have to be clear about what I will do and what I won't do for myself, and what I can do and what I can't do. Mm-hmm. And what I don't want to ever do is lose the clear-eyed seeing that love allows. Mm-hmm. I fought too hard for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think once you begin to taste, the walls come down, everything starts to expand and connect, right? And that is what moves us towards the union, the oneness that you talk about, that you write about so beautifully in the book. I wonder what practices in your life help you move toward love and union. We talk a lot on this podcast about spiritual practices.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, and you give us some in the book, which I love.
Yeah, I do both centering prayer, and I do some somatic, what I call body prayers, which, and I do yoga as well. So I have several kind of quiet practices, but I tend to, I started some years ago in a charismatic spiritual tradition, and we did what was called soaking prayer.
Oh yeah.
And which really is kind of like centering prayer with a focus on Jesus. And the whole idea, I love mentioning the idea of soaking prayer, because the whole idea is that without this kind of relational connection, you're like sponges, like a dry sponge. And you're kind of, I always say you're, crinkly, crumbly. And then the image is that love is like a waterfall that rains on us. And as water fills a sponge, it expands and it enlarges. And so the idea of soaking prayer is that you're just under this waterfall of love, just receiving that love into you. And it's a quiet, very much like centering prayer, in that it is an apophatic. You're not talking, you're just quietly receiving. We would jokingly say you can't kiss and talk at the same time. And so this was a kissing prayer. This was an intimate, receiving. And so that's how I started my journey of transformation. And it made it easy for me to kind of transition into centering prayer and sitting in silence. So I do walking meditations. I walk, and paying attention to life is a practice for me, because it's easy for me to, I use the word numb, just kind of go about life and in my routine without noticing. So I use a practice of noticing, taking pictures of flowers and nature things, rocks. And my friends joke at me because of the pictures that I share, but it is an intentional spiritual practice to notice the life that is happening around me, the life that is happening within me. and then silence and walking and yoga. So again, just like my experience of life that has been myriad and multiple, my spiritual practices are as well. There's no like one thing that I do. And what happens is I kind of wake up and I listen to my body and I listen to what my heart is longing for. And so if that is quiet, then I get on my mat and we sit, in silence for 30 or 40 minutes. And if it's to go take a walk and be out in nature, and I feel like I'm being called to notice, then I go bear witness. If it's to, do yoga, then I'll put on a video on TV and do that, or I will move my body and open myself up to the divine in that way. But it's really what am I being called to in this moment, this day, instead of this is what it has to look like every day kind of routine.
I hear beautiful, just flow in that relational flow,
Yes.
right? Connection with the divine, with God, with listeners all have different words for that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Also listening to yourself and
Yeah.
listening within as well. And
I want to participate in the unfolding of life's mysteries. That for me, I think, that's just my intention day to day. And so if I can do that and show up for that, I feel good about the day.
It's beautiful. Makes me want to stop and listen right now. I don't know if I've done that today yet. Did I do that today? Yeah, since you showed me your book with your tabs, I'm gonna put you on the spot maybe. Is there something that you would want to read that you love from the book?
Oh my gosh. I can do
I'd rather
that.
hear your voice than mine, so.
Let's see what I have to. This is a small one. It's towards the back of the book. Sometimes we'd rather choose messy than alone. And sometimes we're so numb to our own habits, we can't see a way apart from them. We resign ourselves to bad because we've never experienced better. Child of divine love, you weren't meant to be a doormat. Child of divine love, you weren't meant for a life of constant pain, betrayal, and harm. Remember who you are, child of divine love. Remember who you are.
Gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yeah, much of the book speaks hope and healing. I mean, in some ways, all of us have been damaged, right? None of us escapes unscathed from this life, but many people, groups of people, different groups of people in our culture have experienced more than their share of pain. And you really speak so calling people out of that in a beautiful, kind, but very direct way. It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. That I tend to be, because I speak of love, a lot of people often think of love as a weakness. They don't really grasp the power and the strength of it. But I have more of a mama bear kind of ferocious experience with love and the truth of it. And love is a beautiful, beautiful experience. But it's also always calling us into the truth of our being, into wholeness, into the circle of life. It's not asking us to cut any part of ourselves off, And the only way that we can turn and see the whole of who we are is kind of with a directness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you give me courage to do that through your words, through your life. So thank you for that. Um, we're going to end, and I have another reading I wanted to do and just use it as a little practice at the end. But I wondered before we did that, we talked a little bit about how listening to others' voices can help us move outside our bubble. And I wonder, who are you listening to these days?
Oh man, what a question. Certainly Cole Arthur Riley.
Oh, love her.
Yes. On Instagram, her handle is at Black Liturgies, and she has a new book that is coming out next in mid-January, I think. So soon, very soon. Um, and I turn often to her. I am a reader of poets. Lucille Clifton stays on my nightstand. Um, I read a lot of David White, um, and I actually really love Jericho Brown is another Black poet that I read. Um, And for wisdom, I listen to Dr. Barbara Holmes and Reverend Jackie Lewis are two. Lisa Sharon Harper is another, and Reverend Tracy Blackman. So I kind of have this group of Black women that I follow on social media, listen to their wisdom and read their words. Since my mamas and grandmothers have all passed on, so I kind of have this. I call them my trio of aunties that I listen to gather wisdom from. Um, and then I am still very much a student of James Finley and Father Richard Rohr and Brian McLaren's work from the Center for Action and Contemplation. So I do listen there, but yeah. So I try to keep it a little diverse still, and but I have some people that my heart turns to for wisdom. Howard Thurman. There is always a book by Howard Thurman on my night table, or one of his papers, or something of that nature that I am soaking and steeping my heart in.
Beautiful. All right, y'all. You didn't catch them. Go back and listen again. Follow and go to Amazon and glean.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Felicia.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I have a bazillion more questions for you, but not enough time. But I'm gonna move to this reading. And it's just part of a longer reading. But I'm gonna read this for us, and then I'm gonna give all of us a chance to sort of slow down, listen, reflect, and actually do what you walk us through in the end of this reading today. So this is a few moments for us to turn our faces, our hearts toward love and to receive. I know the truth is painful to bear full on. It's why we've always told it slant, whitewashed it, prettied it up. But now is the time to bear it, to tell it, and to not ridicule others in their revealing. May we have the courage to open our minds, our hearts, our hands. May the spell be broken, and may we come to ourselves. A beautiful world is waiting. but we cannot get there the same way we reached and developed these shores. Be encouraged. Love never fails. Sometimes things have to break open and fall apart in order to come together again. Don't turn from the discomfort. Don't hide from the wrestle. I can't help but think of Mamie Till's decision to allow her son's murdered and mutilated body to lie in an open casket for public viewing, so people could see the atrocity of not only what happens to Black men and women, but the level of vile hate one would have to possess to brutally, ritually, mindfully maim another without remorse. Emmett Till's body was a mirror for society, but it was Mamie Till's brave decision to lay the truth bare that invited us in to see ourselves. And here we are again, needing to see ourselves. Don't run. Stand or sit if you're sitting. Relax your shoulders. Soften your belly. Eyes wide open. Breathe deep and decide you're here for this. Let's all be here for this. So as you hold that space for a moment, maybe even aware of some discomfort, letting your belly soften, letting the air fill your lungs. To receive the love that gives us courage. To receive the love that tells us who we really are. That tells us who others really are. So maybe just listen for a minute. Is there a word or sense or phrase that love would speak to you today? To remind you, or maybe to let you know for the first time, who you really are. Just hold this space for a moment. Amen.
Amen.
Honest, it's beautiful, it's full of grace, Felicia.
Thank you so very much for the pieces that you chose to share today. They seem very timely and perfect. So,
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving us the gift of the book. And I meant to hold up, this comes out the day before Valentine's Day, which I think is perfect, but you could pre-order it now on Amazon. You already had a book, and we did another conversation earlier that people can find. We talked about your book, Truth Encounters. That's
Yes.
available now. So if you really want to hear more of Felicia immediately, you can go order this book. And how do people follow you, Felicia? How do they find you? How do they hear your voice in their lives?
I am probably most active on Facebook, and so people can follow me there. I also have a website, feliciamurrell.com. And then I have Instagram where I periodically share different pieces of poetry that I write. And that is hello Felicia at underscore Murrell. I totally said that wrong. At hello Felicia underscore Murrell, which the link is on my website. So if you go to my website, it will take you to my social media profiles as well.
Perfect. And I'll put all those in the show notes as
That
well.
would be great.
You. All right, my friend. Blessings to you as you continue to lead us so well in the way of love. Thank you for this book, and thanks for spending this time with us today. You're such a
It was such a treasure and a joy. Thank you again, Susan, for having me.
Thank you. And we bless you to live deeply rooted in love.